Joining us now, of course, she has been a long time on the part of JMU softball in their 13th season, eighth as the head coach. Of course, we know about the World Series trip. She's a friend of the show. Loren LaPorte joining us here on In the Circle at D1 Softball. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Always excited to talk about softball in the preseason.
It is exciting. Year three. You corrected me off the air, thankfully. Year three entering the Sun Belt. Is that? I mean, does it seem blow you away that here you are in year three of the Sun Belt? You got a good core coming back from last year's team that won 31 games, but three. This will be the third year as a member of the Sun Belt. What describe this time so far in the Sun Belt?
Yeah, even though it's year three, the funny part about it is we still haven't played everyone in the Sun Belt. So that's the crazy part. We still have yet to play Southern Miss and Louisiana Monroe. So we are actually in a transition year. This is kind of the first of the new set of conference opponents. So we actually get to play Southern Miss. They're coming to us this spring. So yes, this is year three, but there are still some teams that we haven't seen. We played Southern Miss, in the tournament last year, but haven't had a three-game series with them yet. So excited for this kind of new conference set going into that and going to some new places in the Sun Belt.
That's wild to me. That is, I mean, there's so many wild things I can go with that. The fact that you've already done 2 years in the Sun Belt, and the fact that you haven't played everybody in 2 years, it blows my mind. But that's the sign of the times now in college athletics with all the realignment that's happened and the sizes of leagues growing and things like that.
Correct.
Tell me about you bring back a good core from last year's team that won 31 games. When you reflect back on last year, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we bring back a lot of players that have a lot of experience. It was so funny that you said that because I was with my equipment guy this past week, and I'm like, we have 10 jerseys that we have to frame on senior day. And that's a lot, like we have 10 people that are going to be leaving us after this year, and that's a big class. We have a mix of fourth year seniors, fifth year seniors, and a 6 year in Reed Butler. So it's definitely a mix that's going to be leaving us, but have made such a big impact, on our program. And I'm excited for the last year of their careers and to see what they can do. And we have some really good freshmen that came in as well that are going to be impactful for. So I think it's a good just mix. We have depth this year. And I think that's an area where we maybe weren't super strong last year. We didn't have a lot of depth, and that was a lot due to injuries, which usually happens to toward the middle to the end. But I'm excited about our depth and being able to go to different people and in different situations.
It really is a fascinating roster. You mentioned what 10 seniors, but yet you also have seven freshmen on your roster. So you've youth, but you've got the experience. I mean, it's obviously got depth, but it's a unique roster. How do you blend them all in and build that chemistry?
Yeah, and that's what a lot of the fall was for, just having, getting them connected and getting them to form relationships outside of the field or the weight room. We spent a lot of time this year doing a lot of team culture meetings, and we did them once a week. We read a team book together, Power of a Positive Team by John Gordon. And I think that helped a lot kind of connect, and we did a lot of small group stuff. And I think the upperclassmen have done a good job at trying to make those connections. I mean, what's funny is, in Ree Butler, she's 24 years old, and then we have 18-year-old freshmen, and I think she's done a really good job. Even our fifth years, Hannah Hennessy and Kylie Gleason, at making everybody feel really welcomed.
You mentioned Reed Butler, 415 last year, 11 homers, 36 RBIs. I would imagine you have a lot of when you have 10 up to 10 seniors, you probably have a lot of leaders, but it's got to start, I imagine, with Butler from a leadership standpoint.
Absolutely. She's been with us through it all. She was on that World Series team and she was injured that year, unfortunately. But, Reed is just JMU through and through. She absolutely loves this place and loves the program, loves her teammates, and everyone loves her. She's got, such a big personality, but such a great personality. And I am excited to see what she can do in her final year.
Of course, you have some young players that are returners, like a Peyton List, who, of course, had an incredible year as a two-way player, hit 9 homers, 29 RBIs, won 10 games in the circle. was freshman of the year, Sun Belt first team. Just describe her and kind of how you envision this year going with her, because you played her in multiple positions and you threw her a part of a staff, which we'll get to. But just describe her and what you've seen from her and what you expect from her in 25.
Yeah, Peyton reminds me a lot of some of our greats. She reminds me a lot of Odyssey, to be completely honest with you. She can do a lot of things and she can do things you can't teach. She is just so naturally gifted in this game. And that's something that, we've talked to her about and just maturing and wanting to give everything that she has. When you're younger, you kind of hold back a little bit and you don't really know what you can do. And I think, this year, especially, obviously we have a new pitching coach and Maddie Penta. I think they have connected well and it has made her work hard when no one's watching. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing for Peyton. She's already, a very good ball player, but we see a lot more in her, and I think she knows that. We tell her that a lot, and we're looking for her to step up in a lot of different ways. She hits for us, big power hitter, and I want to see more of her in the circle, and that's kind of what we told her. And we talked briefly about just our freshmen and seniors, but our sophomores and juniors, whew, that's a tight core too that make big impacts on the field.
That's incredible. And I kind of described your roster as kind of like the old school roster. And nowadays in college, it's like there's so much changes with the portal and everything. You're developing players here, building with the recruiting there, and it's starting to pay off for you there. Maybe you took a step back at one point, but now here you are with all this depth and experience coming back as a result of that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a big reason why we all coach, right? Is wanting to develop players and wanting to see that growth. I mean, that's personally why I coach. I'm not we've had transfers and they've been great, but to have, freshmen come in and just to see the difference in maturity and development in 1 year, and then obviously with Reed, in 6 years, that's what it's about. And not just development on when it comes to softball, but it's just like the relationship and the personal time and life stuff that you go through with your athletes, and that's really why I have stayed in coaching. Like I love the development part, and if we've already seen so much of that with this team.
When Peyton is not pitching, how do you envision using her? Obviously, you'll be in the lineup, I would imagine, still. But
Yeah.
defensively, do you envision a position? Is it still to be determined? And then in the lineup too, because when you have a great player like that, I've seen so many coaches. Some like to use them at the top of the order, some in the middle of the order. It's just so many great options. It's a good problem to have. I will admit, from a
It
coaching
is.
standpoint.
And, I think with utility pitchers, you do have to be careful. We experimented that with Jalen, Megan, and Odyssey. They all play positions too. And I think where you have to be careful is, you don't want them to get tired toward the most important part of the season by playing them in a different position, by throwing overhand. And I think that it kind of came into play a little bit with Peyton, being an outfielder, throwing long distance, diving for balls. And I don't want her to be out there. Obviously she can do it. I know that in the back of our heads as a staff, but we really want her to be more, in the circle and probably DPing. But it is nice that she can play a position, and we would feel comfortable if we got to a point where we needed to play her defensively. But that's not what I envision right now. But like you said, it can change.
It's a good problem to have. Like it's good
Yes.
to have that in your card, right? Like it's a good deal to have. So you mentioned the pitching staff, and you mentioned Maddie Penta. So you know how to do podcasts. You know how to segue. You mentioned Maddie Penta as your new pitching coach. I saw her one of their last games in Tallahassee with Auburn, where she went 12 innings in a game against UCF, where the game ended around 3 in the morning.
Mhm.
Hopefully you don't get to some of those games. But what would take me through the process of bringing in Maddie to be your new pitching coach?
Yeah, well, I think what's been so nice about Maddie is that she is still doing everything, training wise, pitching wise, and our players are trying to keep up with her. And I think that's what makes it great. Like whenever you bring someone in fresh off of playing and never in this field before, you're always a little like, oh, can she flip the switch this fast? Can she go from player to coach? But she has done, such a good job. And I think a lot of that is because she's doing what all the pitchers are doing. She's running, she's, weightlifting because she still has to stay in shape too for her pro career that, she's going to be starting in June. So they're seeing all that it takes to be great. And they're not just hearing it, they're actually visualizing it by watching her. And I think that's really been awesome for Maddie as well. And I think it's helped her develop the relationships that she needed to develop with each pitcher because she runs with them and she's able to show them stuff and what she means. So it's been a great transition for her. I think there have been days that, she's swimming and it's a lot, on the office side of things, but when it comes to the pitching part, she knows what she's talking about and she's a very hard worker. And I think pitchers, appreciate that.
You mentioned she's clicked with Peyton List. Tell me about the rest of the pitching staff and what you envision from the staff this year in 25.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I told her. I said, every single one of our pitchers are very different. So you've got to find a way to connect with all of them, and it's going to be different in your relationship and how you, handle that. I think with Peyton, we have Kirsten Fleet as well, who is very strong in the circle and was very strong for us last year. So what I'm excited about is Fleet and Peyton now have a year under their belt and they get this life a little bit more. And I think those two, out of anybody on our staff, have matured so much in a different way. Just the mindset that you have to have going into games, the preparation you have to have going into games. So, I think, with Fleet, she's going to be huge for us as well. We do have, a senior, Rebecca Mew, that came in from Georgia. Same situation, very, very experienced, understands the life, and understands the adjustments you have to make from game to game. And then we have two freshmen that, have come in and really done a good job at making us look different as a staff. We have Madeline Johnson and Taylor Johnson, funny enough, that are from Virginia. And that was important to me. I think we need to have Virginia players on this roster, especially in the circle, because they play a little bit different from their home state. So that was important for us in this class recruiting, that we needed some Virginia players, and they were, two of the best in the state. So I just think we have a very diverse pitching staff where we can do a lot of different things. And yes, we're young and old, if that makes sense. Like you said, it's just a good mix, and I'm excited. And I think we needed some depth in that circle from last year because we were very injured in the circle last year.
Well, and then, not that it's any different in any other league, but in the Sun Belt in particular, pitching really rules. I mean, look at the success that the leagues with Texas State in recent years with Jessica Mullins, Louisiana with, when they had Sam Landry and among others, and of course South Alabama with Lackey. The good news for you is most of them are gone with graduations.
They're all
very
gone.
young.
All the All-Americans are gone, and we are excited. They are. I mean, good Lord, pitching has been dominant, and it still will be in this conference. All the teams, like I've said before on this podcast, they're so well coached, and the coaching staffs have been at those universities for a very long time. So they know how to prepare, they know how to develop their kids, and the pitching is the biggest thing in this conference that is so dominant. So yes, the All-Americans have left, but there's going to be some more, in this conference that are going to be coming through. So yeah, that's one thing that's, it kind of sets, I think, our conference apart in a lot of ways, is just in the circle, and the preparation that goes into it. So I'm hoping that, we can keep our tradition of also, being very strong in the circle and being healthy, from February to May. And then that's the hardest part, making sure everybody stays healthy and doing the things they need to do to recover.
Has that been one of the bigger adjustments so far, even in the Sun Belt? Like, nothing to take away from the previous league you were in, but you didn't have the depth of arms that you saw in the Sun Belt here in the 2 years, with from top to just all-American type pitchers that can get you to regionals. From a depth standpoint in the league was incredible, which helped the Sun Belt last year be arguably, depending on which metrics you look at, a top 5 league in the sport.
Yeah, we were. If you look at the RPIs, we're right. I think we were six outside of the Power Five. And that's that's what we want to do as a conference. When we meet as head coaches, like that's the goal, is to be the RPI team or league, right out of the Power Four. So it was exciting when we had our head coaches meeting to see all those metrics. But yeah, I mean that's obviously the biggest difference is the preparation of the teams, the scouting, and then the pitching.
Offensively, obviously List will be a part of that. Reed Butler, we've talked about. Talk about the rest of the offense, and what you expect and the identity for the offense this year.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I was just kind of the lineup as a coach starts really, you think about it almost every single day now. December and January, you're thinking about the lineup and all the different things you can do as an offense. And what I like about our offense is we have a lot of we have like a lot of leadoff players and people to get on base, but we also have a lot of power. So like that's why we're still trying to figure out like how to put all those pieces together in the right spots. Having a leadoff, a number two hitter, a 3-4, that's going to be the more RBI, and then be able to start that lineup again, another leadoff, get on base, and then have the bottom that's also going to be able to produce a lot of RBIs. We also have a lot more speed than we have in the past. I'd say historically we've been one of those offenses that rely on home runs as our run production, but I do think we have added some players that are going to be able to advance by stolen bases. And that's something that we've really talked a lot about this fall and really put a focus on is our base running and how we can move up on little things that I don't think has been the focus in the last 2 to 3 years because we didn't really need to. We had so many home run hitters in our lineup. But I like how our lineup is different and a lot of players can do different things.
Of the new faces, who do you think will talk about some of the new faces the fans will get familiar with offensively?
Yeah, offensively, we have Reagan Wall, who is from Alabama, our first ever Alabama player. She is lightning speed. And the nice thing is, like, she can do really everything. She's a triple threat. She can tap and go. She can lay a bunt down. She does it late, so you can't. It really difficult for a defense to play her. And she's also gotten stronger in the weight room, where she's able to score runs as well if we need her to, by power slapping or hitting away. And then Callie Legston from Pittsburgh. She's just so athletic, and can do a lot of things, can run, can hit for power. And Emily LeGrand is also from Tennessee. So we're recruiting a little bit differently. If you kind of look at our roster and where our players are from, we're getting more players kind of from that southern region. Obviously, we play in the Sun Belt, so that's where a lot of our games are. I think in recruiting and coming off the fall, they're going to have an impact in our lineup as well.
I was going to ask you that, like being in the Sun Belt, how it's impacted recruiting. It sounds like it's helped you expand the recruiting. Is that an accurate statement to say?
Absolutely. I mean, we had really never had a ton of interest from players in that Alabama, Georgia, really even Tennessee region because there's so many schools down there, and I think a lot of times the players down there don't love to be that far away from home, but we've been fortunate enough where we've been interested, they've been interested, and it's worked out well. And we're still, our eyes are still in those states. Obviously we've always done pretty well in the Carolinas and Floridas, but the Alabama, Tennessees, and Georgias have kind of been new. So we're trying to figure that out and make relationships with travel ball teams down there a little bit more than we have.
I know in the past when we had you on the last couple of years, we talked about the Sun Belt. One of the things was you get to see new cities, and certainly Louisiana. You even told me, reminded me off the air, that, of course, the great food you got to take them out the team. That's experience. That's part of the student athlete experience is you get to see new places. That was one of the things about going to the Sun Belt that you were excited about is your student athletes get to see new experiences. You mentioned you're going to some new places this year. Which one do you think that your players are going to be looking forward to the most?
Well, yeah, we're going to Mobile. So
Oh,
we're going to
wow.
South Alabama. We've never been there.
Really?
I've never
Wow.
been there. So excited about going to South Al. Like I said, Southern Miss is coming to us, but we do get to go to Lafayette, Louisiana again, and that has been my favorite place to eat. Like I said, we don't go to chains down there. We pick up the phone and we call those coaches and we call people that we know down there, and we're like, okay, where do we eat? And we have eaten very well down there. I have to take a few days off when I get back to Virginia because and one thing about the Sun Belt is a lot of the places that we go love this sport, love softball, and the fans. And there really hasn't been any places that we've gone where we haven't been treated really well in the community, in the town. And that's why I'm so happy, for just being a coach in this sport, is that so many people love it. And yes, they want to beat you, but they still treat you really well. And maybe that's their kind of motive. But man, everywhere we've been have been great, and the coaches have been great in this league.
As coaches in the league, I mean, certainly with all the changes, like there's no Pac-12 this year, for example. Do you see as coaches the opportunity here? As I mentioned, I mean, you could be a top four, top five league here, consistent. I know I've talked to coaches Becky Clark in the past and about that. They feel that way because of all the roots they have in the league and the passion in there. Is that constantly a conversation there about, hey, we can now be the quote power conference when it comes to softball?
Absolutely. I mean, we had three teams that got in last year, and I think the goal is the 4 to 5. And I think this is a year that this league can do that. Yes, we've been blessed with, there's been a lot of teams in this conference that have been blessed with, all-American pitchers, and that is what you need, right? Like you have to have the pitching to get past a regional. You really do. But I think everybody knows that, and it's kind of wide open this year. And I think, a lot of the coaches in the league are excited about the competition this year.
Conference tournament, tell us a little bit about it. Has there been conversations about it? I mean, you've gone through it a couple of years. It goes from site to site on campus for now, but you don't play everybody. So the conference tournament becomes even more important from that standpoint. So what's been the conversation? Is it going to stay the same? What's the chatter as far as the conference tournament?
From what I know, it's going to stay the same. We're going to the tournament is in Troy this year. I think it's only like 2 or 3 sports in the Sun Belt Conference that actually play at institutions. Every other sport plays at a host site. But unfortunately, there's not a softball stadium. Oklahoma City is obviously already being used by the Big 12 for their tournament. So, but I don't mind going to host institutions. I mean, that's what I've always done in my whole coaching career. So, it's not like we have to be at a neutral site. But I think the toughest part about the tournament is, one, you said it, we might have never even seen those teams. And it's a quick turnaround. We get done with our last conference series on Saturday, and then we got to fly out on Monday. So if you haven't faced a team in the league, it's like you're starting kind of new. And that's what happened to us last year. Like we played Southern Miss in our first round, and luckily we played them in UNF. So we had a little bit of, experience with them. But yeah, I mean, you could face off against someone you don't even play in the regular season. So I don't think it's changing. I haven't heard any. You might have heard something I
No,
haven't.
no, I was just curious.
Yeah.
The thing I'm more interested is hopefully, are we close to you hosting it down the road here? Are we close?
Oh yeah, so you have to put a bid in. And
Okay.
I think it is time for one of the East schools to host a tournament. So we'll put a bid in for 2025 and 2026, and there's a lot that goes into it. So hopefully down the road in the next 2 years, we can have the tournament here in Harrisonburg.
Good, because I mean, for people that don't know, you have great facilities. You've hosted regionals, super regionals, you've hosted conferences, you've hosted it all. I
Yes.
feel like that would be a cool chapter to mark kind of a checklist there for the program there. And I think for the viewers that get to watch the Sun Belt tournament, and a lot of fans, it'll be a cool experience.
For sure. I hope it happens for sure.
All right. Well, I'm pumped. This is my campaign. I'm starting the campaign for you now.
There you go.
Scheduling wise, obviously, as we record, the schedule's not officially out, except we do know where you're going to start the year because you're going to be in my backyard in Orlando there in a very strong tournament with UCF, Georgia, NC State, Illinois. Is that a preview of things to come this year? That you're a tough I mean, you always play a tough schedule non-conference, but it seems like that you're setting the tone early there with that opening weekend.
We are. I reached out to Bear early and I was like, we want to get down there again. It's an amazing place to play, amazing place to go. It's easy to get to. And so she was like, yeah, but obviously then I didn't know the teams. And then she sent me the schedule. I was like, oh wow. But like you said, we've always played a tough schedule. Nothing really, scares us, intimidates us. And like we just talked about, you have to have a high RPI even to get talked about for an at-large bid. So why not? And I think it prepares your team. You see a lot of things when you play top 50, top 25 teams. And I think that's good for the preseason before you go into conference play. And I do release the schedule next week. I know I haven't released it, but we're going to UCF opening weekend, and we're actually hosting two tournaments in the month of one in February and then one at the first weekend of March. We did it last year. It worked. We didn't get snow. It was colder temperatures, but we have a lot of Northeast teams that come down and play in it, so they're used to the cold. But we're also playing in the Huntsville, Alabama tournament at the Toyota Trash Pandas stadium, and it is loaded. We play Auburn and Ole Miss and ETSU and Miami of Ohio. It's also a very good tournament, and it's the first ever tournament that they're hosting there. So we got
Oh,
invited to
that's.
come to that.
I did
Yeah,
see a press release about that part of that
yeah.
that tournament at first there for their facilities there.
Yeah, so interested to see how that's gonna go. And then we're playing in a tournament in Salem, Virginia. Actually, where I played college ball on our home field at Warrior Sports Complex in Roanoke. And the Virginia Tech is hosting it. That's also loaded. We play Virginia Tech, obviously, have been amazing in the last 10 years, really. And Penn State's coming down for it. So there's a lot of very strong East Coast teams in that tournament. Villanova, who always win the Big East, I feel like. So excited about that. So our schedule, it's not. I think we can handle it, but I think it's going to show us a lot of things, and we're gonna have to be gritty to play the schedule, and I think that's what we need, and that we have historically been known for.
Yeah, and it gets you ready for Sunbelt play. And it's worked. That's why the league's been a multi-bid league last year, like you mentioned, three teams, and to continue that's part of it. And I like the fact you're playing all over the state of Virginia. I've always wanted. I love that state. We've talked in the past about it. I visited there up many a times to see family. I have family that live up there,
Yeah.
and the talent that's there. I mean, do you want to talk about recruiting the state of Virginia? Nothing better than going throughout the state and playing throughout the state, and the recruits can see you play.
Absolutely. And our 26 class that we've recruited, it's loaded with Virginia and East Coast players. So excited that we're not going, on the road 10 hours away for the first 4 weekends. We are staying close by so that, our fans can come, our families can come. And that's important to us as a staff.
Last question. As by the time you get to Orlando, what are some questions that you have about this team that you're looking forward to finding out when they get in game action that you think could be keys to the season?
Yeah, having that dog mentality, and being able to handle adversity and things that they're not prepared for. I think when it comes to preparation and scouting, that's all a part of it, but you've also got to handle things that maybe weren't expected. And hopefully, with such a veteran but very high IQ softball players across the board, that's not going to affect them. And that's where that kind of dog mentality, and we've talked about that, this fall, you have to have it, or you're kind of going to get eaten alive. And especially now with how the game's changed and with how much video is out, like the adjustments that are being made in game in the last 5 years has been just insane. And players know how to make adjustments quickly, and you've got to be able to make those adjustments back. And I think it's important for this team to be able to do that, and get in an offensive rhythm as soon as they can. I think that's also very important, is figuring out their roles and who's going to do what in certain situations. And I think that's kind of what those first 3 weekends are about. Getting that dog, getting that grit, but also figuring out what you're going to bring to this team.
That's Loren LaPorte, JMU head coach here on In the Circle on D1 Softball. Coach, always a pleasure to talk to you. I always enjoy this. We try to get to do this every year. Look forward to seeing you opening weekend in Orlando. That'll be fun. Plus, you get to bring your rookie SID Megan, who's very popular in that campus. So
Absolutely.
she's
We're excited to see you and get down to Orlando.